try something a little different here. I have my iPad to see if I can go live on this thing and read questions as a viewer as well as the transmitter. And nothing showing up here. All right. I'm not sure. Oh, there it is. Aha. Ooh, a little bit of a delay, but look. Whoops. I'm transmitting to myself. Oh, a little bit drizzly down here in Florida. And, oh, I was going to say somebody just checked on, but it was me. Okay, here's a test. 3, 2, 1. Takes about 2 to 3 seconds in lag time, but that's not bad when you get right down to it. Let's see. Okay, somebody else has just logged on. From Russia. Sergey, is that you? It's just a little weird. Well, anyway, I'll go ahead and get on with the morning coffee chat. And I know this is a totally unscheduled thing, but I wanted to see if this would work for the Sunday broadcast. So I'll be able to read comments, and it looks like that just might work with a little bit of a delay. It must be about lunchtime in Russia. So one of the things I was thinking about this morning was I had talked before about the basically 4 different kinds of kit model companies that are out there. You have companies that were either already making models like wooden models that in the 50s and 60s transitioned to plastics, a Comet, Monogram. Then you have companies that were plastic companies from the get-go. I mean, they weren't model companies, they were plastics companies like Aurora that later got into models, and then that became their dominant thing. Then you have the later companies that went in as plastic model companies from day one. And something just popped up here, but it's not a... Oh, listening to the Tour de France. I didn't even know the Tour de France was going on. Okay, cool. And then, of course, you have the companies that never really made models. They just had other people make them for them for the most part. An example of that might be Intex. But that I was breaking down sort of the technical side of model companies. They're like based on their lineage. But another way to look at them is there's 2 kinds of model companies that are in the model. Those that are in the model business because they want to be in the model business usually have a love affair with the subject matter, and then you have those that are simply run by people who see it as a way to make some money. And unfortunately, companies that got transitioned from one to the other, like Monogram did. But and then that segues into something that I was asked yesterday. One of the viewers asked me, "Hey, Pursuit, how you doing? Good to see you." One of the viewers had asked me, or it's actually his daughter had seen the show and asked what was my favorite model, and she's like 9 years old. And the simplest questions are the hardest questions, and I didn't want to give some bloviated answer, so I picked my Tamiya F84G. I like the subject matter. The job I did on the kit was not too bad. The pieces just fell into typical Tamiya quality, and it came with a steel ball and a mount that was mounted in the nose so that it would sit on its nose. And I just made fantastically detailed decal sheet. I just picked that because it's one of the first models I remember building when I was done. I didn't have any problems building it. It was a very detailed model, it looked great, and I was just completely happy with it. And of course, asking somebody what's their favorite models, like asking which one's their favorite children. But Okay, maybe that's a little over comparing, but it did get me to thinking about companies that are run by people who really love what they're doing. And some of the viewers had sent me some fairly lengthy messages. They'd actually met the Tamiya family, and they said that Mr. Tamiya, was just a 72-year-old kid who still loved building models. And I've gotten to talk to some of the people at companies like Fantastic, Alan Urey at Fantastic Plastic, Pete Vetri at Atlantis, and these others. And these people are clearly in the business because they love models. And I mean, it's a business; they have to make money. But the companies are just that are in the business because they want to be in the business are so much richer for model builders. Regardless of what you may think of the product, they're striving to keep the hobby fun. I mean, of course, they got to keep their doors open, but it's so much more fun to deal with than when you get these companies that everything's just bean counting, and no one cares about quality control, or it's just, and that's kind of what brought some of these companies down. I remember it's even talking about in the Aurora book after Aurora changed hands and the new management had taken over. Everything was about driving costs down, and we lost out on so many great kits that could have been built. I know we were talking about the Aurora Learjet and the Aurora Cessna 182 that didn't get made despite the patterns having been made. And I know I would have bought those. I bought every civilian aircraft Aurora made, sometimes more than once. The only airplane I ever got in fine scale model last April was that 50-odd-year-old little Aurora Cherokee. That model's about that big, and there's a certain. It's hard to describe. I know for a lot of us have had stuff, for especially like me that's only ever had one model. We've always tried to get stuff in fine scale modeler. It's been like just a personal goal. And when I got it in there, there was a certain beauty in it being that particular kit because I had built it a couple of times as a kid and I'd always loved it. And it's not the greatest kit on earth. I mean, it's just your average, mid to late 60s little 1/72nd scale airplanes. Probably got, God, probably hardly has more than a dozen parts to it, 2 dozen parts. But it was that, I was happy that was what got in because it was that perfect blend of childhood nostalgia and real world modern day building skills. And everything on that airplane is so tiny that, I mean, it proves to me I can do this when I slow down and take my time. I had gotten in the habit of, this is a little distracting now, I hear myself like a little echo down here, like you keep looking down like, what? But there was it used to be as a kid, the idea of having more than one model going at a time was a rare thing. That was like a birthday thing because you'd get 3 or 4 models for your birthday. You want to build them all on the same day. Your biggest fear was running out of glue. But one reason I have 3 or 4 or 5 projects going at one time now is, when you're in the mood to build, you're in the mood to build. And of course, you get to that point where you have to stop, whether it's paint or, hey guys. Well, how's the weather in Singapore? Gosh, this is amazing. Sitting in my house in Florida, I'm talking to people around the globe. Like I said, we live in the future. But by having 4 or 5 projects going at one time, when you get to a point where you just have to stop, okay, now I can put all my stuff down, move away, and go work on one of the other ones when I'm in the mood, when you're in that building mood. Because I think we all know you have to be in that creative mood. Sometimes you just don't feel like working with it. Yeah, Maxis Models International. Have to start drinking International Cafe. But you get by having these projects, the biggest advantage of the shed, when I can keep it clean, is I have a place I can spread out 3 or 4 kits. Normally, if you look at any of my build montages, I what I do is photograph the box. I photograph all the parts laid out, and then I'll photograph just steps along the way. And unlike a lot of people like Plasmo and these others who do these fantastic builds, I just do still pictures most of the time. Well, hello from England, Singapore, England, and America. By golly, this is just too cool. And the most interesting part is I'm doing it on a cell phone because, believe it or not, my iPad, my computer, for some reason won't see the camera on YouTube. It sees it every place else, but on YouTube, it keeps saying it's being used by something else. But when I try to use the actual Wi-Fi, everything bogs down or won't connect. I have no idea why. Using the cell phone with regular, I have Sprint, using the cell phone with just regular telephony, and hitting YouTube Live, and boop, here we are in almost real time. Hello from Russia. Russia in France too. Russia in France too. Wow, that's incredible. I hope I don't say anything offensive and start a war again. Um, but you know, there brings up an interesting topic, and I'm a little delicate about jumping on it because I don't. You never know how people feel about certain things. But when I talk to people from other countries, I have to remember I see things from the point of view as an American. America, and we definitely know we can trudge around with a big boot at times, not realizing we think we're saying the right thing or doing the right thing, and not realizing how we're being perceived. So I try to be a little careful about that. But modeling subjects, of course, I like to build everything. I like to build Russian, German, American, Japanese, Italian. Although I don't think no, I do. I have one Italian model, but it's in Swedish markings. That's at CR42. Good morning, Dennis. So I wonder if there's like any kits or not kit, well, maybe kit companies too, that somebody goes, I'm from this country and I won't buy from that country, or I won't buy a model of something from that country. I think most of us are big enough into history that we don't have that problem. But given ancient or not that ancient national histories, I can understand why somebody might say, well, we'll give an example. My dad's half of the family is Jewish. My mom's half is Catholic. I was raised Catholic, but when I don't think this is a false memory. I seem to remember going to the dime store and buying it. I think it was a Messerschmitt, and that's back when they were correctly historically marked on the box art. And I think I'd stopped at my grandmother, my little Jewish grandmother's house, and I bought a model airplane. And she was like, why did you get that? And at the time it was kind of lost on 9-year-old Max, but I seem to have a faint recollection of a small discussion about that. But my dad was cool with it because, hey, it's history, and he loved airplanes, and he didn't have a problem with it. It was what it was. But I just wonder if some people, if any of you guys have an attitude of, I just won't build that kit, or I won't build a model that's made in that country. I don't think that pretty much goes on anymore. But I'm sure, I imagine there's some folks out there that for whatever reason, like, yeah, we're not having X, Y, or Z on the shelf. Which is one of the beauties of things like sci-fi. But I don't think anybody's going to say I won't buy a Klingon battlecruiser because they invaded my homeland. Of course, I'm sure you guys know that in Gene Roddenberry's mind, and this is, I believe he said this, but the general consensus is that the Klingons, the Federation represented the UN, the Klingons represented the Russians, and the Romulans represented the Chinese. At least that's the way I always was brought up to understand it. Although the Romulans were clearly Rome, they were clearly based after the Roman Empire. Let's see. I still don't trust Canada. Well, nobody does. Nobody's that polite. It's a ruse. And John, if you see this, I'm sorry, but I'm still suspicious. Good morning, Chris. Good to see you. Well, hear you, read you. Good to read you. Okay, that didn't sound quite right. So, one person asked me one time how come I enjoy building so much German equipment. And the reason is simple. They just make such cool looking stuff. My brother, I was working on my Gwillow Stuka that I cratered on the first flight from the new Star Trek movies. If I got a really good deal on them, I think like most of us, I'm not particularly thrilled with any of the new Star Trek that's been coming out. And I'm a classic. I mean, I like Next Generation. I have a Voyager, which is my wife's favorite one, because she's used to a situation where the woman's in charge. But hey, that's the world I live in, so I'm good with it. But we have the big Voyager model on the shelf. We have the movie Enterprise I have actually wasn't mine. It belonged to a friend of mine. I think it was either Norman Farrell or Tom Sue that owned it. And when they moved or something, they left a bunch of their kits behind, and I wound up with them. And I was like, I'll bring them back to you. Like, nah, go ahead. I don't build anymore. So that's how I wound up with that big movie Enterprise. I tend to only buy original series stuff. Although one of my Klingon battle cruisers is original series, and the other's from the movie, which of course looks similar with modifications. I don't like Star Trek, but I have built an Enterprise for a friend though. Yeah. Well, since you brought that up, yes, Pursuit? Are you talking about that big purchase of kits that company made? Because yes, I did go to that. That was staggering. Wanted to get 500 kits or something. A company on eBay got like 500 kits that was all vintage kits, and I guess all still in the boxes and everything. They're on their eBay store. I only had a chance. I've been so busy. I only had a chance to go through it real quick, but it was impressive. But real quick, getting back to the Star Trek stuff, this is actually working. I can read all the questions. So despite the slight distraction, at least now I'm kind of in tune with what's going on. So the Star Trek stuff, I realize it really helps to be a Star Trek fan. Having grown up watching it now, although I was a kid when the original series was on, I only remember seeing it in what do you call it, syndication. Hello, Brian, from Missouri. And I totally get if that's not a person's thing. I don't judge people on what they build or anything, because they don't build everything. But neither do I really. I mean, I try to, but oh yeah, it's like some of the Star originals throughout the con. Yeah, it was like going to the Rocky Horror Picture Show or Comic Con. How many people were in costume? Well, those folks build those costumes at a Comic Con. Any opportunity to wear it, they're going to. But my brother had the original AMT kit, which came with the lights, and they were just little sweet light bulbs, and it came with like 3 of them, one in the sensor bridge section, one in each engine, as I recall. And that was the one that was notorious. There was no way to stop the engines from sagging. So it just it looked. And I distinctly remember him he tried everything, including melting the plastic on the inside. It was just poorly engineered. And they fixed that in later ones. And that was one of the reasons I didn't buy one for a long time. When I finally did get one, I got it secondhand, and hey, the engines aren't sagging. And I realized they had re-engineered the model with that 25th anniversary one from the movie that I got from Tom or Norm. That one problem was you put the stand on it, and it flopped over on the saucer section. And I used to reload ammunition. I used to do cowboy action shooting, and I put a fistful of 44 and 45 caliber leg slugs in the back of the thing where the shuttle bay was at to get it to balance out. So it weighs bloody 2 pounds. If North Korea produced models and was I'd probably give them a miss. Yeah. But it's funny, speaking of that, I just recently stumbled onto a channel called Dimple, which is nothing but interviews with defected North Koreans that came to the South. And their views of South Korea and the West and everything. It's worth a watch. If you're not familiar with what's going on in North Korea, it's a real eye opener. But if you've ever seen one of those parades where they goose step, they like slam their feet real hard as part of their stilted, over exaggerated march, and the person who was a woman, and so they're all out in their little half mini skirts doing these high step marches, and she was talking about how many people get injured. They have like at the end of one of their parades, they have like a 10 or 20% casualty rate from shin splints and in back injuries and everything else. I mean, it's the most. You literally go out there and slamming your feet because it looks cool. And of course, before I get too judgmental on that, my sister did ballet. Ballet has a surprisingly high injury rate too. So yeah. But you only have to see that last John Wick movie to know that. That was hardcore. Woo! I better stop talking about that. But hey, that'd be an interesting figurine, a model of John Wick. Um, yeah, yeah, I'd buy that. Uh, so, of course, I'll watch any movie with Peter Stormare in it. Um, he actually played a somewhat more sympathetic character in that one. Don't see America doing that. Doing what? I've totally lost track of what I was talking about now. Um, but back to the models. They just who was it? Just put out a brand new. If you are a Star Trek model, they just put out a brand new shuttle, and I have the old shuttle. That's the one I made that disastrous mold. It had the mold leak with the resin. I was trying to make a copy of the base of the shuttle of the Galileo 7, and the new shuttle they put out. Of course, that kit, the one I have, is not very accurate. Oh, goose stepping. Yeah, 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 yeah. In fact, it's funny you should mention that, Chris, because she talked about. They showed her video of the Americans marching. American military troops marching parade. And I understand, normal military marching as we do it in the West. She was amazed. She goes, "Oh my gosh, they look so relaxed. They look so good. Such pretty uniforms, but the way they march, clearly the military cares about its people." I was like, "Well, yeah, we have to pay for them if they break." I didn't realize is that the Korean military doesn't have a retirement when you do your time, and they make you do like 10 years, and you get out and you're just on your own. And no matter how long you stay, there is no retirement. You work till you drop. I was like, "Jeez." Um. Oh, a Big Lebowski figure set. That would be good. That would be cool. Yeah, it actually would be interesting. The first one I'd want to be the John Goodman character. Uh, I did A to Romania 2 months after the revolution. That was an eye opener for Western eyes. I couldn't find a model kit anywhere. um, real quick. In fact, that revolution kind of stopped this from happening. But the dude, yeah, I'm the dude. Um, Romania was going to build a copy of the Bach 111 called the Rambach for Romanian Bach. And I don't know if they ever completed one or not, but a friend of mine, a guy I actually wound up working with for a while I was in college, ran a small airline, Atlantic Gulf, and he had 3 Bach 111s, and he was looking to buy the Rambach when they came out. He figured he could order about 10 of them for about the cost of probably 4 or 5 of used ones in the States. Of course, after that revolution and everything, that all died on the vines. Yeah, Romania, I wonder if Romania ever had a plastic kit model. Because I know the Eastern Bloc has a lot of kit model companies. Gosh, I think there's 11 of them in the Czech Republic alone. And I actually was going to do a video on this, and I lost the material, so I kind of lost. I put it together. It was going to be real quick and dirty, but it was on Czech model companies. But it was just going to be a quick overview. Maybe sometime I'll get back to it. But if I remember right, they have like 9 million people in the country and 11 kit model companies, which gives them one of the highest ratios of plastic kit manufacturers to population that exists. Japan has a lot of kit model companies, but they've got a large population too. And Ukraine has had quite a few also. And some of these kit model companies are really make some really interesting stuff and really good stuff. Uh, Hello from Germany. Guten Tag. Um, and Hey, Mac, welcome back. Yeah, I just decided I would do this since tomorrow's the last day. I thought I'd do a little more live interactive stuff, and I wanted to practice with this thing and see if I could. And it was working. I can see the comments now. But the Eastern Europeans have a wonderful fascination with well, actually, and the Russians, the Ukrainians, they'll have a wonderful fascination with kit modeling, just like the Japanese do. Mini Arts kits, aren't they from here? They may be. I'm not sure offhand. Oktoberfest. Yeah. I went to the Hofbrauhaus one time. I had the beer stein around here that I bought somewhere. I don't know what happened to it. My wife's probably using it to wash the cat. I'm just kidding. I'd still drink out of it. But the uh, the Russians, of course, we did that bit on building models, model building in Russia, which Sergey had provided all of the information and images for that and the research. I just put the video together and read it. And of course, now you've got companies like Zvezda. And apparently when Zvezda first came out, they had a lot of issues, which you expect from a kit model company that's just getting started. But they made a lot of fixes, and now they're pretty well respected. Uh, I have I built one of their, I don't think I built one of their kits yet. Do this every Sunday. You know what? I can't commit to that, but I might be able to, depending on my schedule and everything. Yeah, we might be able to do that. Roden. I have not built a Roden airplane. I've heard good things about them. I heard great things about Wingnut Wings also, except everybody complained how expensive they were. But I have not built a Roden kit. Um, let's see. No festivals with plenty of beer. Well, that's the part that matters. You can get drunk at home as well as with a crowd, and less likely to wake up with a stranger. But nothing is impossible. Um, so the Constantine, oh gosh, what's the fellow that started Vesda? Sadly, he passed away. He was very young. He was only like 51. But Zvezda has really put Russia on the map, the respected model maker, from what I've been able to see. A friend of mine said the thing with molding is getting the cool rate of the plastic over the parts. Probably the hardest thing molding. Is that what you've heard? Uh, yes and no. Yes, but it also depends on what medium you're using. And if I remember correctly, one of the reasons that beryllium copper is very popular is because it cools very quickly. You have less time in the mold. I think it's more of a problem when you use steel molds. Now, steel molds last longer than beryllium copper molds. You can get more shots out of them. But very few no, I don't think there's any companies except maybe Tamiya or Hasegawa that are cranking out 2-3 million at a shot now, because like when they made the Tom Daniel the Red Baron car, they made like 3 million of those things in 2 years. They were burning out the mold. The production rate was so high that became an issue. And of course, Monogram had everything down to a science. But the cooling rate is a big deal. Uh, I think Russia is the only country that still will deal with beryllium copper because it's a dangerous material to work with. I mean, physically dangerous, and it doesn't last as long as steel. So that has a lot to do with it. But a lot of companies are gone to steel molds. And now with modern techniques, it's not as hard to cut steel as it used to, although it's still much more difficult to work with. But yes, the cooling rate has got a lot to do with it. It also depends on the quality of the plastic. Um, well, I'll be on about my schedule when I go back. At first, I'll be on when I get through training. I'll be on reserve. In fact, I have everything on the iPad here. I got into it last night and I gave myself cold chills how much I'd forgotten. Good morning, hello, Stephanie. Um, let's see. But back to your question, yeah, that's part of the equation. But there were actually issues with the quality control of the plastic itself, the styrene they were getting. And during the '73 oil crisis, a lot of the model companies, and I forget if it was Aurora or Revell, which one it was, but they actually had problems even finding polystyrene. And when they did, some of the stuff they got wasn't really as good as they were used to. And the machines are set up to, heat it up, inject it, cool it a certain rate, and pull it out. And they were apparently getting some not so great quality kits out of the deal. So apparently in 73, 74, there were, you could buy some kits, and I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Uh, it, it's probably two of the easiest things to mess up on Earth are a model injection and a souffle. And there are so many places you can go wrong. And one of the things that um, an individual showed me a photograph of a kit model that was molded in an extremely unusual color, and it was a one-off that he'd gotten his hands on. And when they set up the molds and they put in the inserts go in the big steel frame, and everything's got to be adjusted, and they'll run a batch at one time. But they didn't want to go through the trouble of changing out the plastic and everything. They just wanted to get this thing set up and do a couple of test shots to make sure everything was working. And so they shot a couple of military models in pink. Once they knew that the test shots were done and it came out okay, then they switched the color over. But you'll notice a lot of these things, you'll buy the same kit and it's a different color than last time. There's a lot of reasons that could be. And as Andy had pointed out in one of the issues with Aurora, they had a series of models that didn't sell. They wound up buying a bunch of various colors of green styrene plastic to go in the machines. And they'd started something that didn't pan out. So they wound up with all of this various shades of green plastic. So they wound up making a lot of various shaded military models in various shades of green, so they could use all that up. Hey from Moscow, Zvezda Airplane 1 for Beria BE200 seems to be nice. Haven't built it, but watched the review on Dasha Models. The main Russian female modelers channel. That's interesting. Hey Sergey, good to see you, man. Or hear from you. There is a Scale Models magazine. Yeah, Scale Modeler. Fine Scale Modeler is the big model magazine in the U.S. by Calmback Publishing, and they usually have a reader's submissions, but a lot of the kits that don't get in the magazine will make the website. Although they don't seem to be updating that as much as they used to. It used to be there were like every month there was some new stuff, and now it's like every 4 months. I don't know if they're getting less submissions or they just too many things going on. I think they also have, well, of course, like everybody, they have a social media, and I think they have a YouTube channel. But Fine Scale Modeler covers a lot of the events too, the big conventions and stuff, which I guess aren't going on right now. And of course, you look at the work some of these guys do, and you look at your own models, you just want to weep. But it gives you a goal to strive towards. To me, SAS Desert Land Rover was in pink. Now that might have been because they figured that was an easier color for people to prime. But my guess is if they did the Land Rover in pink, yeah, they probably just had a bunch of the plastic laying around. Hey John, no, nobody's late. This is a totally unscheduled thing. Although maybe I'll see if I can do a Sunday morning every Sunday. So now I just did the Tom Daniel designed Rommel's rod, and which Garfield Smith sent me, but I did not build the one Tom Daniel sent me. I put it beside the box, but the kit Tom sent me is still. Hey JC. So the kit came in a khaki color. With black tires, of course. So if you're a kid, you didn't have much paint. The only two colors you need are black and white for the tracks and for the skeletons, and of course you want to paint the machine guns black. But the model needed very little actual detail. I just put the wash on it and muddied up some brown paint and covered the window. I wanted to look like it had been in the desert, for a long time. And but I didn't use any rust because it's the desert. But my inspiration was that P40 they found a few years ago out in the desert that was almost completely intact. Scale Autos, yeah. It's funny. It's sad. It may be sad at the same time. There are several good publications on model railroads, and there's still one for slot cars. There's one for just about everything, but it's definitely not what it used to be. There used to be several kit model magazines, and of course now we're pretty much just down to Fine Scale Modeler, and it's a good one. One of the things that's really great about that magazine is and I realize probably a lot of it's advertising, but The first couple of pages show a lot of the new stuff that's coming out in various scales, and every once in a while you find something you just have to have. And they do a new kits review at the back. Hey James, and in fairness, they do a pros and cons. Although I'm sure they're trying to help sell the kits and promote the industry. At least they're honest about the problems with the kits, so it's not like a total commercial. But I think I've seen one model in there that they had no cons on. And it's funny, one of the best models I've ever built. I built two of them. I have the third one to go. The Gato class submarine. It's a big Revell 1/72nd scale Gato class. That really, normally it's been my experience when you deal with a big model like that, you're going to have some fit issues. It's just hard to get. The more you upscale things, the harder it is to get right. But that actually didn't have any problems. It went together. I bet, not including painting or weathering, but you could build that kit in a day, no sweat. Yeah, I bet there are in Japan. The Japanese, God bless them, they are fanatical model builders, and well, a lot of it's made there too, probably helps. But to their credit, model building never seemed to have lost steam over there like it has in the U.S. And Ertl Blue Printer magazine. I remember Ertl. I don't remember the Blue Printer magazine, but Ertl's got a fairly complex history. I did their bio or their history, and I actually had to make it a four-parter. That was the only time I've had to do that because I had to put in MPC and AMT and all the companies they wound up buying and selling and round to. When old man, because they were primarily die cast. Oh, hello. All the way from the Netherlands. Hello, gaming grandpa. Air International. Somebody just sent me a copy of one of those. That is an interesting magazine. I'm going to miss them too. That, to me, and Airfix do have magazines. In fact, I'd say there's probably been more books written on Airfix than any other company out there. And of course, it has such a long history. A lot of the books are dedicated to certain segments. But when I went to do the Airfix history, I had so many books to choose from. It's not a matter of what to put in; it's a matter of what to leave out. But old Nicholas Kovish, the guy that started that company, you read his personal history. Man, that guy just would not take, failure is not an option. He's just amazing. They did. I do remember when the Testers plane came out. I'm not sure that wasn't somewhat of a PR stunt because those things they put out at first were completely inaccurate, and which kind of made them collector's items today. But I've heard that now Revell did get a visit from the federal authorities when they put out, I think it was the Nautilus. Was it Revell? Yeah, and or it was one of their submarines. I forget which one. And I remember Boys Life, yeah, in the '70s of that. And I also got a scouting magazine. Yeah, the F-19, I think that's what they called it. Good morning. So anyway, he actually had to show them the photographs from public documents he had used to make the model of the submarine. And the most sensitive part of submarine design is usually the propeller, because that's where a lot of the noise comes from that sonar could pick up on. And it's funny you should mention that. Somebody's mentioned the Heath kits. I was just chatting about them. I know a couple of people. One of my friends has built Heath kits, and somebody I used to take care of their kids for him. His television was a Heath kit, and I was always amazed how cheap you could get a TV if you were willing to build it yourself. For those who don't know, Heath kits were you could buy like a television, but it came in parts, and you soldered it all together. And if you knew what you were doing or could follow instructions, you could make a perfectly good working television for a third the cost of a real TV. And they were really big in the '70s. Of course, now with everything the way it's made, it's just not. I mean, that was back in the days where you're actually soldering transistors onto circuits. Nothing was printed like it is now. Well, anyway, that Nautilus did get him a visit, I think, from the FBI, and they, of course, Lou Glazer didn't hesitate to put, our models are so accurate that they think it's secret. He wasn't about to let that go without that public relations opportunity to go. But it apparently took a 1 hour sit down to show the pictures, and they realized uh, that it was he didn't have any secret documents. However, here's an interesting side story you guys might enjoy. Most of you have probably heard of Topping Models, which later became Precise. That was Bill Topping's company that made the desktop displays for airlines, military officers, companies. Most likely, if you went into a military officer's office and saw a model sitting on a desk, it was probably a Topping. Well, what I did not know until I started doing the research on Bill Topping was that they actually were contracted to make aircraft that were still classified, still in development, and they got documents that to make the models with that were classified documents. They had to keep them in a safe and everything else. So there was real security, and the mold makers, they all had to sign NDAs and stuff, non-disclosure agreements, and they had to keep the whole thing hush hush. And the model building room was locked up. Well, apparently, I think it was either a Predator or a Global Hawk drone model disappeared. And this turned out not to be a small thing. Yeah, they probably did. Yeah, use a pinkish color on the vehicles to blend. But the I'm trying to remember. Gosh, it's been so long since I read that article. Anyway, apparently, I forget if it was a janitor or some of the working staff that had swiped it. Thought it'd be a collector's item. Didn't realize they were going to get a visit from the FBI, and it resulted in a real honest to God National Security Agency investigation. I think an arrest was made, and not just for petty theft or even grand theft, but I mean it got pretty serious pretty quick. And they recovered the model, and they were that sensitive about it. So apparently, I was like, okay, you're making models of this thing, but it's a big secret. So who the hell's going to see the thing? Where can you put it? And I guess some Area 51 guy would have had it on his desk, or maybe to show to congressman or something. But it was quite the to-do, and of course they kept it all very quiet. But years later, it finally wound up in print in some obscure model magazine. But I was like, wow, that's different. Oh, I remember the Matchbox kits. Yes, they were packaged in the Matchboxes. Yeah, I seem to. I don't know if I ever bought one or not, but I definitely remember them. And I need to get a little Matchbox because I promised Wild Bill, the guy I made the Stagecoach for, that I'd make him a little strong box and put Wells Fargo on it so he could put that underneath the driver behind. He wants a strong box, so I got to make him strong box tack onto it. And but it's when what is it they call it? Was it the MiG-19, the one for the popular one in Lindbergh, and actually covered that in the video I think that Sergey helped me with on the Russian kit models. But people forget that except for like gun camera footage or a few photos, back in the 50s and 60s, it was really hard to get any information on technology behind what Churchill called the Iron Curtain. And model makers certainly were not at the top of the priority list for access to that information. So anytime they could get a picture, they would just make what they could. And the Russians had tested an aircraft that had two engines, but they were on top of each other, and one was mounted behind, so it gave it the bottom rear of the aircraft had that step in it. And Lindbergh wanted to make, I think it was the MiG-19. They didn't know what it looked like, so they saw that and said, okay, that must be it, and they marketed it as such. And now that thing has become a collector's item. It's almost like the more wrong your kit is because you're guessing, the more it's worth now because the rarity. Of course, rarity has a lot to do with cost. Rarity and desirability are the two things that will, determine what something's going to cost. And some of those old kits, they are really, really, really getting expensive. I mean, stupid expensive. Oh, that's interesting. Have comments now, but no live feed. Leave it to YouTube. Mysteries of the interweb. The some of the kits, like the Rat Patrol kit, I can remember my brother had the Rat Patrol kit, which came with the 2 Jeeps and a couple of tanks, and we had no idea how horribly inaccurate it was. Turns out they weren't even Willis MB Jeeps. They were, I think they were later post-war versions of the Jeep, according to what I've seen on eBay. And it came with some little bunkered positions and some sand dunes and some palm trees. And this was an expensive kit. It was $3 back in 1967 or whatever. And here in Missouri. But yeah, here in Missouri. Yeah, it were the guys that I knew that had gone to Fort Leonard Wood, which is in Missouri. He said here in Missouri, they used to call it Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, was known as Fort Lost in the Weeds, Missouri. But the Rat Patrol set is now, I've seen one reasonably intact. They wanted $300 for it. It's got a little 176 scale Jeeps with machine guns and a couple of German tanks and a half track. And the irony is, it's not accurate in any way. The tanks aren't that accurate. I think they're Panthers, which I don't even think I don't know if Panthers ever served in the Africa Corps or not. But the TV show was they were of course having to use American equipment that was dressed up to look German. So they're driving around in a white half track and a priest that's had some mock armor put on to change it. So the kit was neither accurate to the military, nor was it accurate to, it wasn't accurate to history, and it wasn't accurate to the show. But you know, when you're 8 years old and you're a fan of the show, who cares? And yeah, no Panthers in Africa. I didn't think they made it there. Huh. Okay. That's okay. The Daisy Duke Jeep was sold. It was misprinted C1. So there was a good possibility, or one of the things is misprint kits that are known to have had misprints or errors also become valuable just because they're wrong. There's just like the famous postage stamp with the airplane, airmail stamp with the airplane was upside down. It's worth like $1 million. The one I know that was it which one it was? I just did it recently. One of the videos. The Nito, I think it was, produced the diorama. Was printed in big letters. Was printed wrong on the instructions, so it's like diorama or something like that. So that's become a collector's item. Actually, I do watch a lot of the airbrush technique videos, and it has helped a lot. One of the things is I actually do have a couple of pretty good airbrushes. I had not attention deficit disorder, but I watch how they do it, and then I practice. And I learned that 90% of airbrushing is in setting the model up ahead of time. You know, if you want the feathered edge. Feathered edges are, I've gotten a lot better at them, especially on 132nd and 148 scale stuff. But one of the things I've learned that's a real trick is feathering a 172nd scale model, because you don't want that clean demarcation line, but you want that feathered edge. But to get it, even with the airbrusher set to real low pressure, it taped off. To get everything, that's why Play-Doh's gotten so popular, molding clay, because it makes a pretty good demarcation. But almost invariably, when I'm prepping the model, there's something I overlook, and I wind up, you know, how did the tail wheel get green? Also, while you're on that, of course, you got to give some test shots, getting the mix right and everything. But what's really hard to come to grips with is a lot of times you get everything set up and you do your little airbrush, and that's it, and you're done. You're like, all that work and over. And so you're like, okay, back in the bottle, clean the brush again, you know, take it looks great, but it's 90% in the setup, and the actual airbrushing is the easy part. I tend to use acrylics, but if you're going to use enamels, don't get curious about how it looks. Set it aside for 2 hours before you try to, or more, overnight before you try to peel that tape, because it's not uncommon to, you know, pull the mask a little soon, and you actually had a good spray, and then when you pull it, some of the stuff's still wet, and then it capillaries out. Like, grrr. Patience, patience, patience. Sterling, yeah. My dad owns that company for about 20 years. I remember Bob Klaus, would you? Well, that's interesting. Uh, I would say yes. I one thing I have no problem doing is, especially now that I've got Zoom on the computer, uh, or can record a phone call. If I can talk to somebody that was involved with a company that I've already done a history on, I could put like, Sterling version 2 interview with so and so of Sterling Models, because I guarantee you they have a ton of insight that, and that's what this site is really more about than actually building models. It's still more of a history of the companies kind of thing, which is how this whole thing got started. And uh, getting to talk to people like Andy Anchus and Pete Vetri and Alan Urey and Tom Daniel, Mike Mashat, you get these incredible insights that you're not going to get from an article. And people are curious, especially people who built them back in the day. But even people who don't remember are still curious, just because it's interesting. You don't think of drama and stuff when you think of somebody making kit models, but they had their dramas like everybody else. And some of these got into some ugly corporate takeovers. I mean, um, and it kind of breaks my heart when you see guys who build up a kit company, and whether through changes in market forces or whatever, they get, you know, kicked out of their own company. And let's see. Airbrushing is witchcraft. Yeah, sometimes I think so. This held for review. That's interesting. Show. Okay, Tom Haldus got it. Claire Ravenwood, Sarah Jane. Testers kit did the. Okay, it's okay. That big stealth from Testers. I have one on the shelf right now. I haven't. I've opened it. I haven't started on it. I got that for $20. It was basically an estate sale. The Hobby World had it sitting in the corner, and the box is bloody this big. And they had $20 on it. And I was like, I don't know. I know it's supposed to cost more than that, so I just bought it on that and shoved it on the shelf. I was thinking about kit bashing it at first, making it because I was going to make a sci-fi movie, and but I never got around to it. And now apparently the thing's valuable, so I'm glad it didn't touch it. The box is pretty mashed up, but the kit appears to be complete. So I don't think they sold that many of them, which is probably why you can't find them. Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm G43. Yeah, with my model building skills, doing a video series on building models would be more like, okay, kids, here's how not to build a model. First off, don't drink coffee so that your hand shakes. But I have taken my time. I mean, really slowed down on some models that were important to me, that like the Midway Vindicator, and done a really good job with the Aurora Cherokee. And truly, I do that once in a while to tell myself, you can do it. But when I build, generally I'm building for fun and relaxation, and there's a level of seriousness, and everybody has to set that volume knob. I mean, some guys have it dialed up to 11, and that's their happy place, and that's what this is about, your happy place. For me, there's good enough to look at and show my friends, but I'm not gonna sweat the little stuff. It's just at that point for me personally, it starts to become a little too much like work. Let's see here. The Sterling Curtis JN4 Jenny. Yeah. Keep the cat out of the room. Oh, the cat's over there right now sleeping. She could not even care that I'm here. Seeing a model kit being discussed on the news. Model rule number 1. Keep the cat out of the room. Yeah, I'm in the shed when I build. The cats are naturally destructive if you put anything on a shelf, because they love to walk on shelves. Uh, so to me, airbrushing is something I've gotten better. Good equipment helps, but don't, as you say, it's a poor carpenter that blames their tools. One thing I've seen some work guys have done with rattle cans and primitive airbrushes, and I'm like, they took their time. They just got good with it. It's amazing what a true artisan can do with even the most basic equipment. But that's why it's called talent. And of course, a lot of it's a practiced hand. But you can have the best equipment in the world if you don't use it properly. You're still going to have an unholy mess on your hands, and I mean literally a holy mess on your hands. But the idea to me behind model building, and again, everybody has to set their own volume level. To me, it's to enjoy it. You want to create something, but you want to enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, then do it differently. No, I haven't seen your tools, but emotional attachment, yeah. Oh God, yeah. I am. Well, you guys have seen the inside of the shed. It's a train wreck. Clearly, I'm not a clean freak, and it's the place I go to just unload the world. I go in there, and unless I'm doing something like this, I only leave the phone on in case my wife has to call me. But to me, I always loved building models. I got an immense amount of pleasure out of them as a kid. They were an extension of your imagination. I guess they still are. But I think that set the tone for me. And one of my brother's friends, yeah, absolutely, I agree. An expensive airbrush is not good. That's what you can mess up a spray job so easily. Um, but anyone who collects old instruction sheets to make copies available. Yes, actually, I ran across um, there is a YouTube channel, not a Facebook page, that's actually dedicated to that. And I forget the name of it, but you can probably just go on Facebook and type in kit instruction sheets. And that's what they do. Just like the Box Art Den does does rejuvenates original box art, makes it look pristine and new. These guys do the same thing with instruction sheets, and I think I sent them all of the stuff on the Stagecoach that was sent by Round Two. And if you guys didn't know this, God bless Round Two. Since they have all the Lindbergh stuff, I contacted them via their website and said, "Look, I don't have the instruction sheets, da da da," and because they actually have a pull-down menu of online instruction sheets available, but they didn't have that one. And about a week later, this beautifully scanned set of instructions showed up on my email. And but I also had folks that already sent me paper copies, so thanks to them for that. And some folks had sent me photographs, enough I could get started. But it was nice to have that really clear set they could read easily. But that's the nice thing about the community. People really happy to help each other out. And yeah, I think you mean from the 1960s. But the internet has brought a lot of this together. The ability, well, like we're doing right now, I'm talking to people all over the world, and on a cell phone. So that's really there's I guess you would call it a belief or a theory, philosophy, that the key thing of all things, the most valuable thing out there, is information. You think about that, I suppose there's some truth in that. Imagine what a little kernel of information at the right time can do for you. Um, the first one was a badger also. Uh, but the information, just think about if a kernel of information, if you knew that in 3 seconds a truck's going to blow that stop sign, you would just stop and wait for it to go by. I mean, just a little bit of information. Well, now information has become the key thing. When you go online and somebody says you can have this for free, just give us your name and email address. You're not the customer, you're the product. They want. That's why you get so much spam. So the just finished the B-47 like you're working on. Careful that outrigger gear. Replace the plastic brass rod. Yeah, I'm doing my gears up. I'm going to put it on a stick. But that is one of the things that still kind of irks me today, is when you get models that try to make stuff that's so thin that you can't even using sprue cutters, it's nearly impossible to get a part installed without breaking it. There's a point in time, guys, you need to spend the extra nickel and make that part out of metal. No, the shed's air conditioned and the thing's properly vented, so I haven't had any trouble with any leaks in the shed with rain. So if that's, I have, if you see some of the drone footage, I might have had a downward shot. You can see some patches on the roof that I had done because where a tree branch had gone through it. I've been real fortunate in that regard. Smaller roofs are easier to keep from leaking. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Networking information. I'll bet you if I'll wager. Um, oh, I'm glad. There's a couple of really good websites that are dedicated to that. Though that one I found though was like, wow, you learn new stuff every day. I didn't know they had to add poison to some of those alcohols to keep them from having to be sold as liquor, but oh well. Supposedly old sailors used to drink the torpedo juice because they were alcohol propelled. So, or so goes the old story. So, but I'll bet you, back to the point, I'll bet you, I could, I'm just trying to think of a random question I could come up with, and somebody that's viewing or somebody would either have or know someone that has or could send me the information. Let's say I said I needed, I wouldn't say something like a decal sheet because that's, well, okay. Let's say I said that I'm building a, let's pick something obscure, an Italian World War II airplane. I need some Italian military decals for a kit, call it a 148 scale Italian bomber. And if anybody's got some or knows where I can get some, I'll guarantee you somebody would either say, hey, I've got some I can send you, or I know a company that sells them. Now, maybe that's a little specific because a lot of decals are still made, but instruction sheets are a good example. I need an instruction sheet for, I wouldn't make anything collectible because that would have value, but I need an instruction sheet for, let's pick something you would need an instruction sheet for, but that's not like a super rare kit. Well, heck, the Stagecoach, perfect example. We've already, there's an example we already have. Three people send me copy. One person sends me an actual paper copy, and two people send me links. One sends me a link, and one sends me photos. And then the company itself, when I emailed them, actually sends it to you. So there's 4 sets of instructions that came my way out of probably 5 requests. So there's a classic example of information. Yeah, you can use lighter fluid to clean brushes, but yeah. Anybody ever see the Lenny Griffith movie No Time for Sergeants, where he's the old hillbilly? It's kind of, they're trying to get him drunk to get him in trouble. The problem is he's drinking moonshine, so all the whiskey and stuff, he's still stone cold sober. They're trying to make his drink, so they start putting lighter fluid in his drink. He drinks and goes, tastes familiar. uh, I'm a little touchy about lighter fluid. As a kid, I did something incredibly stupid that you're told not to do. I tried to put lighter fluid into one of those big disposable lighters. Woof. Yeah, that didn't end well. But I actually still have a couple of old Zippo style lighters from when I was in the Army. And yeah, I was just talking about the Facebook page that has them, and I'm sure there are probably a couple of websites dedicated to them. If you want to get a base to show the airplanes in flight, the thing I've been telling myself I'm going to do, but I haven't gotten around to it, yeah, I think a company actually sells one. If you can put industrial grade magnets in it and put them in the model, it'll hover. But I don't, I've seen a couple of how-tos on that. Of course, it won't hover very high, but, and I don't know how stable it is, but I've usually gotten in the habit of making my own bases. Yeah, the old kits are. It's funny. Yeah, I have extra parts and ordnance decals. You can keep. I have an entire box of nothing but bombs, rocket stuff I didn't put on the models, and drop tanks and everything else. I keep telling myself one day I'm just going to take all that stuff and that busted up space station I got and just glue it all together, just totally kit bash a nightmare space station out of it. Um, but yeah, years ago, hello Nova guy. Years ago, there was a place in Alexandria, Virginia, where I did a very short stint as a police officer, and it was called the Nostalgic Aviator. And they sold books, knickknacks, artifacts, and in the back they had all the kit models. And this is 1980, 88, 89, just before 1990. And so that's what, 30 something years ago. And I was shocked at how much she wanted for them back then. And I was like, gosh, you want $20 as a kid? I paid $1 for it as a kid. And now you go on eBay, that same kid's $50. And so she knew what she was onto. And the nice thing was is that she had a pretty substantial collection, and they were all right there. She'd let you open the box if it wasn't shrink wrapped. And it was, I appreciated what it was, but I don't think I appreciated it enough. And there is one thing I would warn you about, especially where Adams kits are concerned. Uh, Adams made, I did a short bio on them. Adams, okay. Uh, Adams was a tool and die maker. And uh, he got in the model business making some stuff for Revell, and then he wound up going out on his own. It only lasted a few years, and apparently I only have one of their kits. It's that CH-1 helicopter, and it's a really, for given when it was made, it's a really solid kit. And then Snap Plastics of New Jersey took over and ran the Adams line. They didn't even change the box art. They just changed the name from Adams to Snap, used the same multicolored blocks on top. And they did it for a couple of years, and then it changed hands a few more times. Ended up with Hobby Life like it. And some of the molds are actually the ones that Nick Argento uses over at Glencoe, if I remember correctly. And anyway, an original Adams kit in an Adams box, people are wanting anywhere from $90 to $300 for the thing. And what you have to watch out for is, because mine was a Hobby Lifelike, which was 10, 15 years later. But when you look on the bottom of the rotor blade where the stamp is at, it says Adams Manufacturing 1958. Now, this company was one of the few that actually had real honest-to-God sprue. The sprue is the big piece of plastic that funnels in, is the funnel that goes into the injector. And then it goes through runners that we call sprue, but they're actually runners, and injects the parts. So what we call a sprue tree is technically a runner tree. The sprue is a part that's sticking out of the machine that gets clipped off and thrown into a recycle box because they can be remelted and used, and styrene was expensive. Anyway, people will find an Adams box and they'll go get the Hobby Lifelike kit for a quarter of the price, and they'll put it in an Adams box and sell it as a genuine Adams kit. No way to tell the difference because they have the exact same stamping. So I guess they use the same green molded plastic and everything. So got to be a little leery about the original models. And they do the same thing with Aurora kits. There's actually a couple of skullduggerous people out there that will literally counterfeit vintage kit models using reproductions. And when they changed the color of the plastic, it was if you knew what you were doing, it was a way to see. But ones that use the same color plastic, and because they all came off this, a lot of times these molds change ownership, but the molds never move. They stay in the exact same place, in the exact same machines. Someone else buys the company, gets the rights to them, just continues to produce it under their name. You're getting the exact same kit. But the difference of when it was made means a lot to a lot of people. Ronson and Zippo. Let's see, be amazed how much extra parts. Yeah, there's, you go on eBay, you see, we'll sell an empty box for $20. Naphtha is lighter fluid, much cheaper, yeah. Held for review, let's show that. Yeah, that is nice. One nice thing about being there, you can talk to them in person, maybe you can get the price down. I was at a gun show recently. A guy had a completely authentic, 100% parts match Walther P38, complete with the Waffen Fabriken stamps on it and everything. And the thing usually gets $1,000, $1,200 on Gunbroker, and he was willing to go down to his last day of the show. He was willing to drop it to 800. Almost got it, but I was afraid the wife would use it on me. So I didn't get it. And now I'm kind of looking, yeah, sort of wish I'd got it, but I know it'd just be sitting in the safe locked up. Never getting used, but collecting value. Yeah, definitely want to wait till the end of the show. IPM's Canada started a decal bank. You send your unused aftermarket decals, and for posts, fortunately, if you're not a member, you can't use it, but it's growing. Yeah, that's an interesting concept. Hey, Justin, how you doing? If anyone interested, I have Phantom F4J plain Revell 1972 132nd kit H. Oh, that should be worth a pretty penny. Sorry, hold on. Plug your ears. Did that with issue of Monogram Zero. Bought it, put it old monogram decals. Oh, we got it's for sale. Yeah, somebody should jump on that. Yes, it was. I did an actual test. It was a good way to make a nicely explosive little. And I got a practical lesson in chemistry when I did that. Try decaf. I've only had one cup. Decaf. Actually, I used to drink a lot of decaf. I probably should get some. About SF resin kit. Yes. The science fiction resin kit man. Yeah, I did one on Alan Urey's Fantastic Plastic, and I actually got to talk to Alan, so I know that when the information's correct. And I bought his Tremulous Fighter, which I actually was in last night's video. I just got working on. In fact, I nicked my thumb on it. That resin gets sharp. You got to wash it and sand everything down and wash it again, or I should say, fit it, sand it, and then wash everything. And I looked down in that bucket of water. There was a lot of particulate matter in there, so they definitely have to wash those resin kits. No, William. I agree. I build mine. A lot of my models are vintage. The only kit I have that I won't build is the one Tom Daniel gave me, and it's because he personally signed it, and that's why I got that other Rommel's rod to put with it. He also sent me some prints of his artwork. And man, is a great artist, even though he's technically a transportation designer by trade. But the nice thing about Alan Urey's Fantastic Plastic, though, is he really makes stuff I don't think you can find anywhere else, and that's kind of his bread and butter. And he was telling he only gets about 50 production, because in resin they can make more flexible molds, but they only get about 50 kits out of a mold, and they have to go make a mold again. But it's the money's in making the pattern. That's having someone carve the pattern. That's the really expensive part when you're doing resin. Near beer. Maybe they even still make that stuff. I have a Pro Modeler Monogram GC6. Yeah, well, that's very common for the same kit to be produced. They just add some sprues to make the difference. The parts count is critical. The glow-in-the-dark Godzillas, I think it was, and Frankensteins and all that stuff Aurora made, they had to inject the glow-in-the-dark stuff separately, so they would have a frame with the plantains, but they could do a 6-up, 8-up on that and get like 8 of them in there. So, but the glow-in-dark stuff was more expensive, the glow-in-dark plastic, which is one reason they didn't do the whole model out of it. And but that was mixing and matching. There are some companies, and I forget it was Aurora, that, oh gosh, strike what I just said about the Godzilla kit, because it might have been Aurora that actually put. You got to remember, there are injectors that go into the mold. There's a sprue that goes in. If it's isolated from the rest, you could have one tank with the glow in the dark and one tank with the regular plastic and shoot it all at one time. But that requires you to set it up to do it that way, which I would imagine is not a small process. Whereas another way, you could just put in a frame full of the glow in the dark parts, and then when they're done, you put them in the proper kit. And I know they do that. Some companies do that with the clear parts. They'll put like 4B25 and 4B24 molds for the clear parts into one frame, and then they'll just snap them, set them in the proper kits when they're done. But I imagine some kits it's all shot the whole thing at one time, which would make I would think it would make assembly line production a little simpler because you just snip the sprues and put them all in a box and the whole thing's there. Of course, every company does their own thing, so they can do it however they want. It's whatever the production engineer thinks is the right way to do it. Uh, let's see, all my kits I plan on building, not a collector of them. Yeah. Unbuilt kits are dreams unfulfilled. It's a nice way to look at it. Uh, One of the problems about talking about how they actually produce models is every company does their own thing. A classic example was Johan. They had older machines, they had smaller plantons on them, so they couldn't do the gigantic frames that some companies could do, and that explains why all their cars were in certain scales and da da da. Aurora would do one thing, Revell would do another, Tamiya would do another. Everybody, marches the tune. Well, it's just like Aurora cutting their patterns in 1-to-1, where everybody else pantographed down from 3-to-1. It's just that these companies, they each march to the tune of their own drummer. Flash Gordon and the Man from Uncle Car, yeah. One of the things that has a huge impact on a company, of course, is their customer support. I've heard a lot of good things about Round 2. Well, my own experience with them has been good. They sent me that copy of the instructions. I remember as a kid, I had a monogram half track that was missing an entire runner tree, and I told them, and I think they sent me I think it was just missing a couple of parts. Maybe it'd fallen off the tree at the factory, and I think they sent me the whole sprue tree. I forget. It's been so long, but there are other companies out there that were notorious for, hey, those kits missing that tough noogies. I recall them talking about how the last couple of years of Aurora, things had gotten kind of bad, a lot of low morale, and that was in I guess the early '70s, and I had bought a couple of, I think over time I bought 2 of the Piper Aztecs, and they had the clear parts for the Piper Cherokee, which didn't fit. So I wound up with 1 or 2 model Piper. I think it was 2 of them over like a 6-month period because I really liked that kit, which is now people want $100 for it. I think I paid $1 for it. They were putting the wrong parts in the kits. I mean, it was just even in Graham's book, he talks about towards the end the product, the quality control on the floor had gotten pretty bad. That was in the '70s. But when you look at building kits in the '60s and '70s versus what you get today, though, I mean, I know they've gotten really expensive, but look at what you're getting with a lot of these kits. I mean, the level of detail and research is insane. That Edward Brewster Buffalo I've got still, I need to get back to work on it. It's open on the table right now, but it's just insane how much, I mean, they give you 2 or 3 different versions of the airplane in the box, which means different engines, different propellers. You have, if you had an extra set of wings, a fuselage, and a tail, you could just about build 2 complete, or maybe 2 complete models out of it. And God bless Ober. They really, the cockpits are completely different. They have this is 1/32 scale, so they have very detailed cockpits. It says, use this set of clear film and da for the Marine Corps version, use this set for the Finnish version, use this set for the British version, and complete with different interior consoles. And I wound up getting that thing on eBay. It's got a lot of resin parts that are, and I'm talking about engine components that unless you put the engine on the side of the airplane or take every panel off of it, you'll never even see these components. But no, they have a completely different accessory case because the British use this system, and because you have to remember the Buffaloes, the export version it looks in the air, it looks the same, but it was actually a very different airplane than the Marine Corps and Navy version. And in defense of the Brewster Buffalo, when the original F2A came out, it was a very well respected airplane. It just turned out the landing gear was too weak to operate off a carrier, so they gave them to the Marines. And when the Marines started adding all this weight to them, they really bogged the thing down. And boy, they paid for that at Midway. Yeah, I remember that Erickson ship. That's been released under a couple of names: UFO Mystery Ship, Erickson ship. My brother had that, and we had it, the glow in the dark one. It was, I think, it was the UFO Mystery Ship, and that was actually, I thought, was a very intriguing vessel. That would have made a great ship for a TV show or something. Yeah, it is. The hobby really isn't for kids anymore. It is for adults. I'm thrilled when I see a kid that wants to build a model. I've given a couple of models to kids to try and get them interested, but they just one or two of them did have some interest. And but what can I say? Times change. Yeah, normally if the kit looks like it was factory shrink wrapped, you should be okay. That space station I got was shrink wrapped, but I knew it wasn't factory shrink wrapping, and uh, and it didn't have any instructions or decals, so I was like, huh. That's an old trick, but it's really hard to do unless you have a machine. It's really hard to duplicate the factory shrink wrapping. Well, Nova, you better get to work. We all need to take a glue collection. Send Nova guy some glue so he can build those 3,000 kits. Gosh, I wonder if when we die and you go to St. Peter, I hope they don't hold your unbuilt stash against you. You bought all these kits and you didn't build them. You're a bad model builder. Yeah, the fins did extremely well. I think it was a 339 was the export version. It was lighter, had some wood components, and I think they even fabricated their own copies of it at some point. They did very well. The cold weather helped. It also helped that they knew what they were doing. I mean, they had very skilled pilots who were familiar with the weather, and for the most part, I don't think they were fighting earlier Russian equipment that wasn't, the stuff the Russians had later in the war. But yes, they did very well. But they were much, much lighter than the Marine Corps versions. September 19th is Talk Like a Pirate Day. Arr. I don't know if pirates actually said arr. Um, they probably, I saw a documentary on pirates one time. They said the main thing pirates were looking for on ships, yes, everybody wanted some treasure and some coin, but they also wanted much more mundane things like fresh fruit and soap. Arr, where's the soap, matey? Me needs a bath. The One of the things I actually found one was the 3-in-1 Freedom Fighters kits, and that's where I got the little Italian CR-42 that's in Swedish markings, the Polycarpov in Japanese or Chinese markings, and the poly the P7 or P9, the Polish fighter PZL-9 Gullwing airplane. And as a kid, what really in box art sells. It was the box. My brother would buy these things, build them, and put the box art on his wall. And I'd sit there and just stare at the box art. It's so cool. And I don't know how many kits I bought that I don't even know if I really wanted the kit. I just wanted the box art. Yeah, and that's right. And about $20 about right. And the thing is that when you look at it, companies like Atlantis that are putting out these repop kits, they're they're really much cheaper than most. I mean, you see 18, 20, $22, but you look at everything else, $35, $40. They're actually, and given that they usually only run batches of around 5,000 shots, they have to get that to get to make any money. They actually spend as much, if not more, on the box instructions and decals than the actual plastic that's inside. By the way, take this from your Uncle Max. Can't say where I heard this, but if you want one of the reproduced Aurora helicopters that Atlantis is currently putting out, the Cheyenne or the Sikorsky, buy it now. Trust me on that. Yeah, that's one nice thing about building models. Pretty much anybody who can use a hand, who can see, can do it, and then it's a nice sit down, easy for us older types. Oh, God bless you, Rick. I hope you do get them interested in building. Airplanes and armor. Let's see. I do want to get working on that Tamiya. I bought I bought a monogram Panzer Kampfwagen 4, which I built that kit a couple times. The one I melted down for my Godzilla movie, and I bought a the Walker Bulldog from Tamiya, which was only $18. And yes, I think you guys point out the reason it's so much cheaper than all the other Tamiya kits is because it's a 1970s mold, complete with a few imperfections that go right past me, so no loss there. But since they haven't had to pay anything for the tooling costs, they're just still shooting the same mold. The price is low. God bless them for having the sense to do that. Yeah. Oh, what's his name? Is it May? James May, the guy who did the full scale plastic model Spitfire. He had all the kids building Spitfires, doing a day build and 1/72nd scale Spitfires. And even the girls were enjoying it because it's just an arts and crafts project. And um, uh, it's kind of a pity more girls aren't in this. I mean, there are things that would might be of interest, but it's just that for some reason most of the modeling just ended up being aimed at guys, which is ironic because generally speaking, it's been my humble experience that girls are better at detail work and they tend to have more patience. So you get a girl interested in modeling, I bet she could do some fantastic work. My wife does the dolls, and her man, and she's sitting there with the eyepieces, painting eyeballs and everything, and I'm just kind of like, she's actually painted some of my cockpit figures and stuff for me, because and repainted the Mr. Spock, because she does a much better job than I do. And teach her well, actually, if I teach her to use a spray air gun, I could make some great models. Huh, making things, that's interesting. Five grown kids, and I'm wanting to get into it. You can't have your dessert till you build your model. Okay, thanks for. Yeah. Well, the nice thing about doing it this way is that you guys can chat with each other also. So don't have to listen to just. You can just listen to the sounds of my buttery smooth voice in the background, sort of soothing, like low, quiet music. I can count, Amazing Bills on Women model shows. I'm sure there are. I can count all the girls I've met that have built models on one hand. And I guess it's just same, just, I don't know, just something in folks that makes them like some things more than others. And we get your echo too. Uh, wow, we've been going at this an hour and a half already? Holy crap! I had no idea we've been here. Time flies. I don't know about you guys, but I'm having fun. Time flies. What's my battery charge? Oh, I can't see it on this screen. Well, when the camera goes dead, we'll know. That's a really good question, Steve. Steve Mercer's asking about, I build everything. Do I think most modelers build? I think most modelers have a primary focus. With me, it's aircraft, but and there are definitely people they only do one thing. I know people that only build figures. Yeah. My buddy, when I was a kid, when I was about 9 years old, all he built was Aurora figures. I mean, he had them all. And at the top of his shelf was, King Kong, Godzilla, Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Wolfman, da 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 da. Which is why I just loved sleepovers at his house. But then World War II stuff, aviation, and cars seem to be the big holy three. Well, the figures also, so that's the four. And it seems like people who build World War II stuff tend to be a little more varied because they like to build the tanks and the airplanes, and that leads them into building other aircraft. But generally speaking, most model builders build a little bit of everything. But I would say probably aviation stuff and cars would probably be the biggest two categories. And there are people in those groups that's all they do. They don't do anything else. Car guys who only do cars, they have no interest in military or aviation, and airplane guys who have nothing interested in nothing but airplanes. But most model builders, I think, dabble a little bit in other stuff. Yeah, that's a really good question. I doubt anybody's ever kept a statistic on that, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say, based on what little bit I know about sales numbers, that if there's any one group that tends not to stray out of their genre, it's car builders. There are a lot of car guys out there, that's all they build, and cars make up, gosh, over a third, if not half, of all the kit models sold, if my information is correct. A lot of interpolation here, to the point that round two is actually starting to emphasize its cars more and get away from some of its other stuff. See, a lot of the things that these companies make, you hit market saturation pretty quick. That's why they have to keep putting out new stuff to keep people building. But I mean, you can only have so many Sherman tanks and so many 67 Impalas before you just are looking for something new to build. I just find everything interesting, and everything's a new experience. And building those two GTOs have been so long since I'd built a model car that it was almost like I'd never built one before, and that was fun. It was new. That was different, and it gave me some ideas for the next builds. Like I said, when I build that truck, I'm probably going to not put the engine in the truck, but put it back in the bed of the truck. Make some little stand for it, so it's like the guys are delivering an engine. That way you can see the engine detail and see the truck. When I do the Polara, I'll probably build that Hemi engine off to the side and just display it separately, because I don't want to display it with the hood up, and I don't want people opening the cabinet and molestating my model. Yeah. Now, I should be outside cutting grass. Wife will question why. Blame me. Just tell her it's my fault. I figure collecting from I'll tell you one thing that was a surprise. I bought even the Hitler. Oh, I remember. Oh my gosh! For those who don't know, there for a while there was Strombecker put out. I think it was Strombecker put out a set of History's Losers, I think was the name of it, and it was these caricatures of Hitler and Castro and these other people, and I would imagine if you brought even a model of a caricature of Hitler to school today for show and tell, they would call the National Guard. Yeah, Kenneth, I've heard of people scratch building their own figures. In fact, I'm not sure, but if I remember from Graham's book, Steve Winsper that started Mobius, his first thing was one of the old Aurora, I forget it was the guillotine or which one, or the pendulum. I forget what it was, but he couldn't find any old Aurora kit, so he started making his own, and his whole Mobius thing kind of started out of that. And by the way, if you see this picture of the Winspers, that's Steve and his mom that were running that. And of course, they've sold out now. They recently sold out. I think they decided it was time to retire. But they put out some cool stuff. A lot of modern Battlestar Galactica stuff, and just the only Mobius kit I built was that B9 robot from Lost in Space, and it's a really good kit. And you can buy a very expensive lighting kit for it if you want. I wasn't going to go that far with it. That was actually built for someone else. We did spend the money for the glass dome, which it makes a difference. That's such a predominant part of the robot. You don't want that big plastic seam in the middle of it. But it's a very intricate model too. The little sensors up in the dome and everything. But it's everything fit well. It went together nicely. I actually pre-fit everything fine. Then I painted it, and then the fits were tight enough that paint caused issues. So I had to sand off areas, but not a big deal. If all their other kits are that way, I can give them a recommend. But Pegasus owns them now, and Cult TV Man got some of their product line also, and I can't blame them. It's a tough business. These guys, these small companies, these people really work with a lot of heart, and they're trying to keep the doors open and make a living too. I got a 135 scale Ferdinand. This is a Porsche Tiger. Funny you should mention the Ferdinand. For those who don't know, when the Germans were during the Second World War, when they were having a competition with the Tiger tank, two companies competed, Porsche and was it Krupp? Anyway, I think it was the Porsche lost, but they had like 90 of these very expensive, very large chassis built with lower hulls and everything, and so they decided to put a fixed casemate on it with a high velocity 88 millimeter gun on it for long range tank destroyer, overarching fire. And everybody talks about how the Ferdinand was a crappy vehicle. They always broke down because they had this primitive drive. They were was that the one that was trying to use the electric drive system or something in it? And they kept breaking down and stuff because the technology was new. What I didn't realize was that apparently, and I just saw this last night. Yeah, the Ferdinands mechanically did have a lot of trouble getting to the battlefield and breaking down because, but they fixed a lot of that later on. Their first introduction to battle, only a few of them even made it in there. But apparently they got that fixed and got it working. But once it did get into battle, it was actually extremely successful. An extremely accurate long-range gun that was devastating to the enemy, to their enemy. And the Germans were actually, the army was very happy with it once they got them in the battlefield, but they only had like 90 of them. So when they either got knocked out or worn out, they had to replace them with something, and that's where that gigantic hunting Tiger with the big 128 millimeter gun on the fixed casemate, that was to replace the Ferdinand. Everything I'd heard about the Ferdinand up to this point, it talked about what a crappy vehicle it was. And they did have a lot of mechanical problems early on, but I did not realize that they actually had a very successful, once they got into combat, they were actually very successful. So that kind of changes. And I've got a couple of them. They're not kits, they were pre-builts that I made for my little home movies. So I have to treat it with a little more respect. You see, just keep learning. Yeah, the Germans call it the elephant, yeah. We're calling the Ferdinand, the Germans called the elephant, kind of looks like one. Was the elephant afraid of the mouse? Touche, touche. For those who don't know, they called that the elephant. The Germans, at the very end of the war, built something called the Mouse, the Panzer VIII, which they only built two of them. Only one of them had a turret on it. It's in Kubinka at the Russian Tank Museum. And it was a 88-ton disaster. It was 88 tons. It was a ridiculously heavy tank. I mean, it couldn't go over a bridge or anything, very slow, but basically a self-propelled land battleship. But it had the equivalent of a 5-inch Navy gun on it. But they never saw combat. And some people claim that it saw some combat trying to defend Kummersdorf, but I think that's apocryphal. Kummersdorf was their big tank test facility. But it's an interesting concept. But the Germans had a thing for gigantism. They're building these massive tanks, and they would really just been better off building a lot more Panthers and Mark IVs. Or so goes the common conception of revisionist history. Yeah. I have a couple of mouse models that were also used in my thing. You can buy a radio control model mouse that's made of metal. That thing's like, I forget, $3,000. Big jobs, like 112 or 116 scale. Um, the, it's funny. Now, I can't poke, I mean, I have models of the thing myself. People often love to build what if models. Not Fantastic Plastic, but oh, what's that other resin company that makes the Obscura? Oh gosh, I can see their website. I can't remember the Anagrand. Anagrand. Um, the Germans had all kinds of stuff on the drawing board that never got built or never got past the mock-up stage or prototype stage. And Anagrand makes resin kits of all these obscure German aircraft that never went to production. You know, like the war had gone on a couple more years and they'd had the material stuff they would have played with. And some of it is just super cool. And don't get me wrong, I didn't want to see the war go on just so we could have these neat toys, but it'd have been cool if the guys at, out at Dayton could have said, hey, let's build one of these and, see if it works. Um, and there are certain model builders that have a fascination with making that stuff. And it's cool. The Germans just make such cool toys. Uh, and well, actually, everybody did when you get right down to it. They were just kind of out there. Some of it was pretty outlandish. I mean, some of the stuff actually got fielded, like the Blumenboss BV-141 had the engine on one side and the fuselage on the other. I mean, this thing actually was a working airplane. Good Lord. Anyway, I'm not sure I wouldn't be embarrassed to land and fly over that thing. I think he's already been halfway shot down, Herr Captain. But imagine the ribbing those pilots would have taken. Hans, where's the rest of your airplane? But anyway, people love to model that stuff. And in a way, it sort of bridges, in my humble opinion, it sort of bridges the gap between science fiction and reality. These are things that never came to be, but given the technology of the day and a little more time, could have. And that's what makes a lot of things like the Wernher von Braun moon rocket, which has been released under various names. The space taxi, I have one of those in there. The little basically tube with the metal framing nets on each end. And these are things that could have been built, and in some cases are actually in the concept or planning stages. And it's cool to build a Starship Enterprise and go full throttle fantasy. There's a lot of fun to be had in that, or to build kaiju monsters or whatever, because they're total fantasy and they can be whatever you want them to be. And but these other kits, like the Anagrand kits and the Willy Ley kits. Willy Ley was a famous German rocket scientist that worked for America before the war. He was not one of von Braun's crowd. He was here before and during the war. But he worked with Disney along to make some of that stuff along with von Braun. But the stuff that they're making is, that close, a funding check and a few years research away from being reality. And that gives it a certain je ne sais quoi that a piece of pure fantasy doesn't have. And speaking of the Godzillas and the King Kongs and all that stuff, when I was a kid, I loved them, and of course I was terrified of them, but that's part of the reason I love them. Our brains, our amygdalas, they like to be stimulated. That's why people like horror movies. That's why they like roller coasters. We like something, that's, our brain needs that to stay healthy. But what I was going to get at was that now that I've gotten older, and your perspective changes with age and maturity and experience, and I'm starting to see these old kaiju and monster movies, a lot of them, not all of them, in a whole new light. And when you get right down to it, a lot of them, the monsters are the victim. And King Kong didn't have to be abducted from his home island. Godzilla didn't ask to be nuked down in the bottom of the ocean. He was coming back for revenge. I mean, nuke me and I'll probably strike back too. Yeah, that's what he was saying, is that Ferdinand was not a failure. It actually did actually quite well. Um, yeah, I can understand. Actually, First one, a concrete. Yeah, that's right. And somebody's actually producing the mouse that had the concrete mock-up turret. Somebody's actually producing a pre-made. Well, I guess you call it a model of one, but it's not a kit. It comes already built. And I saw that, and apparently it sold pretty well. Um, yeah, it was not in working condition. Yeah, some people. Yeah, you're right, sir. Yeah, that's exactly the information I got. Is that one mouse that's in Kubinka now, it was never 100% operational. But I think one reason people start, there's these internet, oh, it was actually fighting the Russians at Kubinka as they overran they just want to have that. They want it to have seen combat, and it just never did. One of the many little myths that pop up. Uh, Yeah, I'm sure the German infantry liked the Stug 3 because it stayed with the infantry, gave them some fire support they desperately needed. Um, the concept. um, but getting back to my comment with the kaiju, or the monsters, when you get right down to it, Frankenstein, or Frankenstein's monster, Frankenstein, Herr Dr. Frankenstein, it's Frankenstein. Okay, you guys know what movie that's from, right? Dr. Frankenstein, it's Frankenstein. Ooh. Igor, it's Igor. That's from Young Frankenstein, one of the funniest movies ever made. But you think about it. Dr. Frankenstein was the madman. The monster never asked to be made. Godzilla didn't ask to be made. He was happy living at the bottom of the ocean. King Kong is a kidnapping victim. Robert Armstrong should face charges from The Hague for international kidnapping. Um, uh, and a lot of the other creatures, the werewolf didn't ask to be bitten. Dracula didn't ask. Well, depending on which version. Some people say he cursed God and was cursed, so maybe he did sort of ask for it. But of course, being based on one of the history's greatest psychopaths, Vlad the Impaler, maybe don't see him so much as a victim. But the point is that a lot of these so-called monsters, they didn't choose their fates. So I'm starting, and probably next to King Kong for the biggest victim would be the creature in the Black Lagoon. He's happy living in a swamp, until people came along and just ruined everything. In a program with a Colditz glider, which actually, really? Well, that's cool. Well, aerodynamics is aerodynamics. Have you guys ever seen a movie? I think it's called The Birdman with Doug McClure, Chuck Connors, Renee Auberjonois, and Richard Basehart. They're prisoners in a castle, in a POW camp that's in a castle. And they managed to build a glider to get over to Switzerland. No, cool movie. I liked it just because it was hey man, hey, they're building an airplane in a up in an attic and going to launch it. I'll watch that movie. Hearing delay in the audio, yeah, that just be the interweb. What hump? Your hump, did it move sides? What hump? It's nice. Yeah, a lot of us probably seen the same movies more than likely more than once, so you gotta speak of that language of just. My wife and I have watched things like Firefly so many times, and The Birdcage that with Robin Williams and Nathan Lane, that we can actually just sit there, quote back and forth when the situation calls for it. Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles, Serenity, Firefly, Star Trek. It's just so rich, and I tend to, some of the quips I make, I like to steal from the best. And Hollywood screenwriters are often very witty, intelligent people. They make some incredible quips that you just stick in your mind. Doctor Strangelove, we cannot allow a mine shaft gap, and the purity of essence of our bodily fluids, and so on and so forth. How can I quote the lines from a silent movie? Hell, you have to do your best mime. Or in the case of, the early Godzilla movie, it's Godzilla! I never read anything about Lovecraft. Here's a bit of an odd dude. Speaking of people who wrote scary stuff and everything, to me, one of the greatest series ever put to television was and it's up there with Hitchcock, is the original Twilight Zone. And apparently, from what I've read, a lot of that darkness came from Serling's military service. He'd been a paratrooper. And if you notice, there's a common use photograph of him sitting like this with a cigarette. You'll notice his bracelet has parachute wings on it. And total side note, he and Charlton Heston were both World War II veterans, and both of them were public, outspoken critics of the war in Vietnam. And the only reason, I don't want to get political here, but being of the generation, I was just a little too young to have served in Vietnam, but being of the generation that grew up during that, I was always, did like these two sides. There were the protesters and there were people that supported the military and the government. And when you see these people that I respect because, they've been there, done that kind of guys, and Heston was an outspoken conservative and everything, but they're against the war, kind of makes you, it adds some nuance to it is all. Speaking of the Vietnam War, that is probably, except for aircraft like the Phantom, that is a largely undermodeled, people who love to build military models. Vietnam tends to be an undermodeled or underrepresented in the modeling community. Outside of the Sheridan and a lot of UH-1s and Cobras, that's about what most people build, myself included. I don't know if I ever built a model of Sheridan. I built a bunch of UH-1s, but that seems just not to capture the imagination quite like the Second World War does. With me, the First World War aircraft modeling, the thing that, because I admit it, I'm a chicken, it's all that rigging. I've only rigged a handful of World War I models, and they are a holy nightmare. And I think somebody said they were going to send me an Airco, which is the pusher with all that. And if I am going to make myself rig that thing, but I have got to find a better way to rig, because rigging these things, you've got to have a drill point or something. Now some of the kits, like the Gulf Hawk I built, I fully rigged that, but it's maybe rigged. It has the little loops and eyelets and hooks and everything that make it a lot easier, although the medium I used was way too heavy. I still think for smaller models, the best thing to use is like 2-pound test fishing line, because it's the right dimension and it's more or less the right color. But the problem is you get it taut and have the model hold together. And I see this magnificent work these guys do. I'm like, how do you attach all that tiny stuff where it can hold that tension? Some of them use stretch sprue, which of course has no tension on it, but getting that much sprue the exact same size and everything, like, now, brother, you're just getting into some mad talent and patience there. But I've told myself I'm going to discipline myself on this one. I'm going to do it right. And as much as anything else, is just to push myself to be a better modeler, to make me do it, to show myself I can do it. And once you've done one model that was so complex or so rigged or so whatever that you didn't think you could do it, but once you've done one and done it well, you're like, huh, it's not that hard. I did it. Been there, done that. I can move on to other things. Oh. Let me read a few comments here. B-52, Monogram or Revell made the big one. I've seen some build videos on those, and I mean, I'd love to have one, but where would I put it? Not to mention, have you ever had this problem? If you're building a big kit, and I kind of face this with the Gato class a little bit. This is when the tube red tester's glue comes in real handy because it doesn't dry so fast. It's getting everything properly coated in glue and ready before it starts to dry. And and you know you're getting a nice solid acid bond when you're done. Okay, you asked about wingnut wings, and I did a short bio on them. You're right, Stephanie. The Jets were well represented. That's probably the best represented, most popular part of the Vietnam conflict stuff. Um, of course, it's sort of before and after too. So a lot of them, some of them get painted up in the post era. But no, if of course we didn't use a lot of armor in Vietnam, but you don't see like a lot of M113s, Sheridans, Patton or M60s and stuff, and Jeeps, and but I'm not saying it's not rich. It's just I imagine they sell 5 World War II aircraft for every Vietnam era one. But no, agree. But getting back to wingnut wings, is it stretch sprue for rigging, measure, super glue, snip off excess when done, easy peasy. I have trouble getting enough of the sprue stretched to a common diameter and probably doing it wrong. Anyway, back to what you said about wingnut wings. Peter Jackson, as you guys probably know, is an enormous World War I history buff. He has a lot of original uniforms. When he did that colorized version of the show, the movie, They Shall Not Grow Old, which I've seen a couple of times, just fantastic, heart-wrenching, but fantastic. He was very meticulous. He used actual German uniforms and British uniforms to get the colors right and everything. But he was very big on the details. He spent a lot of money to get some magnificent molds made, and I know he's bloody near a billionaire. Maybe it was a fantasy project, or no, not a fantasy. What do you call it? Vanity. Maybe to an extent it was a vanity project. I mean, the freaking Gotha, which is the one I wanted to get, it's $400 kit. But everything's what 1/32 scale, I believe. So it's all common scale. I think it's a magnificent idea. He's making stuff that nobody else makes or has made. You get the stock in, I think. Was it stock? No, was it stock? Oh, anyway, getting off point. And everyone says they're just the best kits you'll ever buy. They really put time and attention to them. But there's just only so much of a market for that. And they have to be expensive because the kind of detail and everything that's going into them, that doesn't come cheap. I am given to wonder whether or not things were already maybe not doing so well and the COVID gave them an excuse to shut the operation down, or perhaps COVID genuinely slammed them. But here's the sort of, for me, sort of the disconnect. Model sales are up right now. Ironically, one of the sad realities is that everything there's a silver lining to every bad thing, and the silver lining to the badness of the beer bug is that model sales are up, along with a lot of things we don't want to be up. But that's the one good thing that's come out of it. And you would think Wingnut Wings sales would have gone up, not down. So maybe just because of what they modeled and the price point they're at, maybe they fell out of the metric that was seeing increased sales. But they did it so quickly once this thing hit that the first thing I thought was, that's odd. No one else is doing this. I mean, obviously businesses like the airlines and the cruise industry are because they got slammed so hard, but maybe they were already looking to do that. Maybe not. Maybe they just had a burp in sales and decided, no, we're not going to do this. I think they pulled the trigger on that pretty quick, maybe too quick. But then again, I don't have any sales figures for them. I don't know. I think I do want to get one of the kits. They are drying up, but I've just got so many other things that it's like, yeah, that's just going to go on the back burner. And probably 5 years. Now, they sold the molds, so the kits may very well come back under another name, or maybe somebody buy the rights to the names. So I don't think we've seen the last of them, but I don't know when we'll see them again. But the thing did go into, was it receivership or whatever, or liquidation? So there you go. But I don't think we've seen the last of those kits, and there'll still be some on the market for a while, but I just hope they don't stupid expensive. Ambulance Sky, but yeah, that would be so. I would definitely buy something like the M38 or something like that just because it's different. No, I know what you mean. Wingnut, Hun 644s. I'm sorry. Where was it? Sarah Jane said that it's Wingnut Wing specialized in one genre. It's not a good business model. I don't know. I know what you mean. You definitely pigeonhole yourself, but you also have the possibility of dominating that section of the market. So you kind of own your niche. But you're right. Is it definitely a niche manufacturer or a niche subject matter? So Squatter Shop was closed for a while, but Up and Dean's Hobby, I think they're back up and running now. Yeah, but how good is this pun? Yeah. It's a good plastic model, not a good business model. Okay, Dennis, you have a good night. It's after midnight here. Where are you, Dennis? See, ratchet my clock around. Well, you're on the other side of the world because it's noon here, and which means I get to eat in a few minutes because I'm doing the intermediate fasting. Not that anyone cares, but I have to wait till noon to eat. So trying to, get all beautiful, go back to work. I did some study last night, and I was kind of like, You must input the to and from point, the anchor point in line 6 left prior to accepting, or the flight management system will reject. Make sure to include the VDA. Oh God, I forgot how boring this pilot stuff could be. Where do you see they sold the tools? They're actually go to their website. They talk about that. I think on the information page, or it may have been an article in one of the magazines. I remember I think it was a New Zealand or British publication that put it out, if memory serves me right. They said the stuff was going up for sale. I may have misspoken. I don't know if they actually had a buyer yet, but I can't see those molds just languishing. However, somebody could conceivably buy them just to house them so that no one else got them. But that would be a heck of a major investment. I would think whoever's going to get them would probably want to put it in production. But that's a guess on my part. This is the captain, ladies and gentlemen, flight deck. This is the captain speaking. I want to welcome everybody aboard. 2 hours and 20 minutes down to beautiful San Juan, Puerto Rico. We're expecting a smooth ride, and we'll be on our way shortly. Welcome aboard. I also do it in Spanish. My wife's from South America. She taught me to do the speech in Spanish when I go down to the islands, and the locals love it. It's a little respect for their culture, but also just makes them feel at home. Bienvenido a bordos. Los hablos de Captain Max, nuestro vuelo. 2 horas y 20 minutos. Gracias por volar con y disfruten de su vuelo. Okay. We joke about the radio voices at Delta because it seems like anytime those Delta guys come on the radio, it seems like they got crushed gravel in their throat. Delta 241. We always joke that must be part of the interview at Delta. Let us see the speech. Oh, this is Delta 241. Okay, you're hired. Yes, to telescope replicator. Yes, that is absolutely correct. That. Okay, you got me started on this. So, I could definitely see Tamiya grabbing Wingnut Wings. In fact, I'd put them at the top of the list because it meets their quality standards, and it's a genre they're not very big in. So, them or Dragon or Hasegawa. Anyway, back to telescope replicator. You remember at the beginning of this thing, I talked about the 4 different kinds of companies, and one of them was a company that never really made its own models. Now think about this, and Minicraft, I I think was that way, or Academy. I forget it. You want to get in the kit model business. It's $50,000 for a basic mold for a basic model airplane. You're like, good God, if I want to have a catalog of 100 airplanes, that's $5 million in molds. And I need a decent catalog, to be able to compete. But then you find out that there are all these companies out there that are either going out of business or have gone out of business or willing to produce kits for other people. Most companies will produce kits for other people. And you go, wait a minute. I'm not going to buy a factory and buy all these mold presses, machines, and spend $5 million having molds made and go through all that process. It's going to take years to get up and running. When I can just contract somebody to repop kits for me, all I got to do is produce instruction sheets and boxes and box art. So I'm going to go to Marusan and whoever else will do it. And one of the nice things about that is I can cover all the different genres by hiring models from each company that has specifically good genre coverage. So I can get my World War I stuff from this group. I can get my World War II stuff from this group. I can get my Korean War stuff from this group. I can get my cars from this group. Okay. And I'm going to order all this stuff in, and they're just going to pop it and put it in plastic bags and send it to me with a decal sheet maybe. Then I'm going to go to this box making company. I'm going to hire an artist to do the box art. And you've got a turnkey operation. In some cases, they'll actually take the original boxes, just have them printed with their own logo on it, with like Snap did with the Adams kits. And in just a few months, you're up and running with a big catalog. Now, savvy model builders are going to know, these guys are just repopping the Marusan kit. But back when this was really popular, it was mostly kids buying this stuff. They went until they opened the box and man, this reminds me a lot of that kit I got from Uncle Bob last week. So yeah, that was exactly what it was. It was a way to get in the kit model business. Remarketing is as big a business as marketing. Ricoh sent a lot of Marusan kits that came to the U.S., repopped them as Ricoh, and then sent them. I think Ricoh did mostly Europe. So Europe got a lot of their Japanese kits from a company called Ricoh that was actually in the U.S. I think that was actually getting them from Japan. So I mean, it can get complicated. It's a web of intrigue. So, but yes, it's extreme. It's exactly what it is. It's a commercial thing.
You have a phone call.
Okay, somebody's calling in, and it's going on noon, folks. Hold on, let me just decline this real quick. Hope this doesn't cut me off. I'll call you back, Ken. Decline. Come on. Okay, and we're back. I'll call Ken in just a minute. So, yeah, price of copper line molds is going to go 100K now, running around 12. Yeah, in some ways, price molds has come down, which I was surprised to learn, but that has to do with modern technology. And like I say, I don't think you can even get the copper beryllium molds made in the U.S. anymore. They're pretty much made mostly in Russia, I think. Okay, you see. Now, Steve, you know more about Ricoh than I was able to find out. I did find the name Richard Constam, but I didn't know that they were based in England. But that makes sense. Okay, that makes perfect sense. If you have any more information on that, could you email it to me? Because I wanted to do Ricoh, but I couldn't find enough information to put a video together. I'm working on one on ODK, Odaka, and Sharp, but there's not enough information to be a 30-second video. So I might put them together in a bulk video or something. But that makes sense why they were going to Europe then. The models that come from Japan to England and over to. You see, that's the nice thing about doing this crowdsourcing, man. You guys all know stuff I don't. You have the pieces of information or access to that information. So okay, guys, we've been going on just about 2 hours now. 2 hours and not 10 minutes. Oh my gosh, I'm afraid I'm going to have to put this to rest. I will tentatively plan on maybe doing this Sunday afternoons, Sunday mornings, if we can make this a thing. And but tomorrow, 4 p.m. is going to be planning, provided nothing comes up to print. 4 p.m. East Coast time tomorrow will be the a live stream. It'll be the final Max's Models regularly scheduled program. I have a special shoe for you tonight. Remember that? I'm old enough to remember the Ed Sullivan Show. We have a very special shoe for you tonight. Oh gosh, well, I think that about wraps it up. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And guys, we'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. East Coast. Have a wonderful week. It's raining here now, so joy. I'm actually going to be doing some studying today, so I don't know if I'm going to get much done working, and I want to get a few things put together. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I want to do on the last bit. It may just be this. It may just be a chat session about nothing particular. Heck, that may be the best way to sign it off. So guys, we will see you later, and take care. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all.